Okay, so my name is Aurelio Ruiz. I'm going to give an overview on a survey we did on gender equality plans in the SOMMa network. It will be a very quick overview. The slides will be distributed and then you can go through them. So we are basically introducing the results. It's important to indicate that I'm not at all an expert on gender, and the idea of this survey was not to make any scientific assessment of that, but rather to identify the topics that could be relevant for the work of this working group. So I always do it wrong now. So remember, celebró, María Maestro, these are the centers we are here, and they are paradigmatic, the things we are discussing. The male celebró centers receive double the funding than the María Maestro units, while they are evaluated under exactly the same criteria and competition. So we did the survey dealing with 4 main topics, which is the leadership in the centers. Do you have equality plans? And we wanted to focus on equality plans because this is the instrument that we should have, the legal one, to promote gender equality in our centers, which is the subjective assessment that the centers do, which are the most relevant actions, the most successful, the ones which are more critical, and some topics linked with gender in research in broader terms than just female participation, but including in other topics. So these are the centers we have in the network, and these are the ones that replied, which is all we are talking is representative of these 1/3, more or less, of the centers. And luckily, we don't have any representative from the social sciences and humanities. But anyway, so the questions said, do you have an equality plan? The idea was, do you have one? Is it open? Is it transparent? Do you evaluate? Is this evaluation open? And is it effective? And we see that as we ask questions, we lose people. Is it enforced? No, it's outdated. Can you please provide a link and see? And some of them is private. Are you evaluating that? And some of them are not. Can we see the evaluation if you claim you are doing and many disappear? And is this evaluation specific to your unit? Because most of the centers who were indicating that it was evaluated by the overarching institution, mostly the university or the SIC, the Scientific Council, which means that there was not a specific assessment of their specific center unit. What was interesting is that in many cases, many centers were developing their equality plans and many were developing the evaluation. So we don't have now one, but we will have one in the following months. About the equality plans, they tend to be relatively similar, covering similar topics, work personnel conciliation, the procedures in recruitment and promotion of staff, actions for visibility, and also to attract younger girls. And the big question was, okay, but are they effective? Are they actually promoting leadership? Then, Patrizia already mentioned, and among these centers, we can see that the distribution, because male and female, is not balanced at all. But we could see broader. The leaders in these networks are the scientific director and the warrantors. The warrantors are the 6 or 10, depending on the center, key scientific personnel who endorse the application and provide the scientific warranty. So this could be a broader and very interesting indicator. How many centers have some kind of balance? Balance meaning we consider 46, 60. There are only 3, and surprisingly, 2 of them in the math, experimental sciences, and engineering side. Then, which is the source of imbalance? Is it because there are more male than women? That was the case. Or is it the case that there are more women than men? There was absolutely no center where there were more women than men. But surprisingly, is there any center who has absolutely no female among these warrantors, these teams of 6 or 10 person, and surprisingly 4. And we have 4 and not 5 because my center, which is not here, had to change a guarantor in the course. And then there is a woman, because otherwise all the María Maestro units in engineering would have not a single woman there. So if you want to see, this is the distribution of guarantors among people. Then we wanted to see, how are you implementing that? And the replies were very confusing, but basically, let's say, the institutions belonging to a larger institution like third-sector universities may have some unit. Several centers have the topic included in their human resources area, and most of them have gender committees, which have two characteristics, I think. On the one hand, they are based on the voluntary basis, and on the other hand, there are no experts in those teams. It's just the community. It's powerful because at the end, any bottom-up proposal can be powerful, but it's, I think, very limited. And nobody had a specific budget on that or symbolic amounts, like in the order of 10,000 euros for that. So what kind of specific measures, I will not get into detail, we'll distribute the slides, and most of the centers are presented later. But basically, we made the extension between life sciences and engineering because there were significant differences, mostly coming from the previous stages. In life sciences, there is not at all a problem in balance at the undergraduate or postgraduate level. In most centers at the PhD level, the majority of PhD students are female. The problem comes later, while on the engineering, the leak happens before, already at the undergraduate level. And there were some common issues. These are all the replies. One interesting topic, I highlighted three things that I think could be interesting now, which is we promote the participation of women in many committees, at the expense of, and sometimes unfair burden for the female researchers. So which are the ways we can compensate this extra effort, and some centers are taking steps on that line. On maths and engineering, there was a vast majority of centers doing actions to promote that more girls come into engineering. And there were also some interesting proposals, like the ability to promote, to advance in your career also if you have part-time positions. That was implemented in one of the centers, and that's interesting. And which are the barriers? It's interesting for the working group because there is a very good match. Many people feel that a barrier is something that other centers claim that they are successfully addressing. So I think the link between both things could be a basis for the working group, but something already identifiable by the list of speakers today is the difficulty to engage male staff on these plans, to go beyond participation, include issues like sexual harassment. You will have the slides, and the other centers will elaborate on this. Something very interesting, surprising to me at least, was that many of the centers are taking actions to tackle gender in research in a broader terms than only participation, about how to design, do research which has a gender perspective. And so to some potential conclusions, and some potential topics for the work of the working group could be based on these three lines. How can we really enforce and support the deployment of equality plans who have a real impact in the capacity to lead? How can a continuous and a coherent answer from most centers was we want to promote and to guarantee balanced recruitment policies, but we don't know how to do it without affecting other aspects. And that's basically that. We'll distribute the slides, and this should be the trigger to distribute discussions, and it would be great if more centers want to take the lead on specific topics. So thank you.
Thanks, Aurelio. Now it's time for the long talk from our gender expert. Well, compared with the 5-minute talk of time I gave you to the SOMMa directors, this is a long talk. So this talk is also part of the Women in Science seminars that we organize every month. I met Cheryl in a workshop in February. It was a workshop about implementation of gender equality plans, and it was part of the Libra project, a European project led by the CRG. And I was impressed with her talk and what all she did in the Babraham Institute. So we already arranged this talk by May. So I'm very happy. Let me introduce you before she starts a little bit Cheryl. Cheryl is from Ireland. She got her undergraduate degree at the Trinity College in Dublin, her PhD in clinical biochemistry at the University of Cambridge, and she did her postdoc at the Imperial College in London. After this, she went on to coordinate European Science Foundation research network programs in functional genomics, in which she supported many project management. Now, she is the International Grant Manager at the Abraham Institute, supporting a wide range of international funding opportunities. Through this role, and within the EU Life Alliance of European Institutes, contributes to European policy development. She is also very active and chairs the Equality and Diversity team at the Abraham Institute, and thanks to her work, the Institute has been awarded with the Silver Athenas Swan Award. That is an award that recognizes good practices in gender equality, and that is mandatory or almost mandatory in the UK to apply for research funding. And I think this is coming soon in Spain and in Europe. The title of her talk is Creating an Inclusive Environment, What, Why, and How. Cheryl, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for the invitation, and to Maria as well. Thank you very much for all of you for coming. I'm really impressed with the number of people that are in the room, and actually the number of men that are in the room. It's really encouraging to see. Often gender equality, mention gender equality, and men tend to run away. I'd also really like to thank the UK Ambassador for engaging with this and being here today. Oh, I need to be loud.
Okay.
No problems. When it's clothing, don't get pockets. Thank you. But thank you for being here, and hopefully that will help amplify this message, which really does need to be amplified. And it's really great that you're also a man, because actually everybody, both men and women, listen more to men currently. And so it's really great that we have a man amplifying this message. We need men talking about gender equality. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your introduction. And I'd like to say I'm not a gender expert. I'm really sorry. I am a practitioner, though. So this is an area that I'm really interested in. I have personal experience of it. I am the leaky pipeline. As Isabel said, I have a PhD. I did a postdoc, and then I left the lab. And we can talk maybe later about why I might have done that and what might have changed my decision. But I really love what I do now. As I say, I support lots of grant applications, but I'm really engaged with supporting our work on gender equality at our organisation with a team of people. It's not just me. So just to let you know what we're going to kind of cover today, we're going to talk about what is inclusion, what does that mean, why should we be inclusive, is it important? And how can you tell, what do we need to measure? And this is some of the things that you were talking about earlier, about how can you tell whether you have an inclusive environment? And some of the challenges that we've faced and we've recognised at the Bayram Institute, and what actions we've taken, and what impact those actions have. So we think about impact quite a lot in the UK, because as Isabel mentioned, in the UK we have the Athena Swan Charter. And for some funding in the UK, you need to have an Athena Swan Award in order to apply for that funding. And certainly, I know in Ireland, the research councils, you need to, for all the funding from them, you're going to need an Athena Swan Award of silver and above. So the awards come in 3 flavours. They come in bronze, silver, and gold, or you can get no award, and you apply. So our application's online. You can look us up on the Babraham website. Our application's online. And so what it recognises is, if you have a bronze award, it recognises that you've looked at your organisation, you've looked at the data in your organisation, and you've realised where you might have some problems that lead to inequalities. And you develop a plan to try and overcome those inequalities. And that is recognised with a bronze award. At the silver level, It recognises that you've done that, you've looked at your data, you've designed a plan, and you've actually demonstrated some impact from that action. So that's why we think about impact quite a lot. And then for gold, which we're still aspiring to, is you need to have sustained impact and also think about intersectionality. So where you have different inequalities intersecting, so be that ethnicity, sexuality, disability, socioeconomic status, how they intersect with gender. So that's something that, as I say, we are thinking about right now. So I'd really like to recognise the consortium that Isabel mentioned, the Horizon 2020 consortium called Libra, which has just finished. The project itself has just finished, but it lives on through our alliance of 13 organisations called EU Life. And this was led by Isabel Vernos, who's based at the CRG in Barcelona. And we had a number of areas that we focused on within our project, identifying a number of different aspects of where we felt there might be issues in the organisations that we needed to address. And as Isabel said, we developed gender equality plans and implemented those actions. And you can see more about that on the Libra website. So addressing equality isn't easy. It's really not easy. And it also depends on your circumstances. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our circumstances, because what you can do, hopefully there will be some things that you see here that you can go, I can do that at my organisation. Yeah, hopefully there'll be a few little nuggets of information in there that you can take away. Some things you'll be doing already, but it does depend on how big you are, what level of autonomy you have, what your area, your discipline is. So different disciplines within the sciences and in different sectors have very different challenges at different points in the pipeline. Whether you've got any money available to do this. I see that not many people have a budget available in the SOMMa organisation. So we do put budget into this. We have one full-time person at the Baber Institute who's helping to implement our plan. So we have 330 staff, 60 students, distributed amongst around 21 to about 24 groups in 3 departments, and we have 9 core facilities. So we're not huge, but we're not tiny. So we're based just south of Cambridge in the Cambridgeshire countryside. It's a really beautiful campus. And our business is looking at cellular and molecular mechanisms that underpin development and lifelong ageing. And as I said, we have been our work in equality, we have a team of people from across the organisation involved in thinking about equality in our organisation, and we call ourselves Equality for Success. And we were recently rewarded we awarded our first Athenas Swan Silver Award in 2014. And really interestingly, actually, when Athenas Swan started, it focused on the scientific staff at an organisation. They weren't interested in all those other people in HR and in grants offices and the technicians and the cleaning staff and all those people, finance department, all those people that actually make that organisation function. They wanted to focus on the science. Thankfully, they've changed that. And since 2015, they've recognised that actually it's really important that we support everybody in an organisation. Everybody is needed to deliver that excellent science. Scientists have that main focus, getting that paper out there, but actually everyone is contributing to that great scientific paper and that great research coming out. And so I need to acknowledge my colleague here, Laura, who's gone on to actually work at the Royal Society of Chemistry in the UK, but she was a real driver and our first equality manager at Baber Institute. And so we felt it was very important that we celebrate with cake and bubbles when we were awarded this last year. And this is the team that was involved in driving that application. So, thinking about inclusive environments, what do we mean by inclusivity? We talk about gender equality quite a lot. And so equality is great. So it provides, let's go back there. So it provides, equal opportunities to everybody. But sadly, depending on who you are, what your experience is, it doesn't result in everybody having the same experience. So not everybody can watch the baseball game. But there's equality, right? So let's think about equity instead. So equity of experience. So this is where we implement actions that are aimed at certain people who need that special, something special in order to have the same outcomes. And I was thinking about equality and equity yesterday as I came into Madrid airport. And I was going to use the bathroom, and as is often the case, there was a long queue of women for the bathroom and no queue at all for the men. And so looked like there was an equal amount of space for the bathrooms, which is all good. However, we weren't having equity of experience, right? And the problem is that, as I say, I've had people. It's really great that we have lots of men in the room, because this affects everybody, okay? So it affected me. I had to wait in the queue, but it also affected the male driver that was bringing me onwards. So it affects everybody, and I'm sure there isn't a man in this room that hasn't had to wait for a woman while they have to queue. So, gender equality and equity of outcomes affects everybody. So it's really important that we engage everybody in solving that problem. Anyway, so that's equity. So, but thinking about inclusion, it's about changing the system. So having a system where actually you don't need special measures, you don't need, everybody has the same an equity of outcomes without feeling that they need special help. So quite often, when we've been talking about equality before, there's been special measures to help fix the women. So I would like to say that women do not need fixing. Men don't need fixing either. The system needs fixing, right? We need to change the system so that we can deliver an inclusive environment, so that we can deliver science where we're doing the best science, so that the best people are coming to do that science, irrespective of gender. That's excellence for me. So, does our system at Babraham deliver inclusivity? If we're looking at our staff, so this is staff by gender. So the women are in green and the men are in purple. And this is our staff over time from 2013 to 2017. And actually, we have quite a lot of women in our organisation. And it looks like we're pretty gender balanced. But as many of you will know, you need to dig a little bit deeper into the data. And when you start dissecting that data by seniority, as we've seen as the data that you presented just earlier, we have exactly the same problem. So we have lots of women in lower grades, but as you go into the higher grades, we have no women at all. So we are experiencing exactly the same problem that you have. And this is hard to change. So this was in 2013. In 2017, we're pushing a little bit further into the purple, but we still have a little bit further to go. And in fact, actually, recent data that we've just been capturing actually means that we have actually about, at this level here, we're starting to get about 50% of women at this level here. So we are seeming to push where we have that cliff, where women sort of fall off that cliff. We are starting to push that cliff away, but we've still got some way to go. So, as I say, sadly, I don't come here with any magic. I come with some ideas, hopefully that you'll find useful and interesting, but no magic. So, why are we seeing this lack of women in leadership positions? And I think there's possibly 3 reasons that we might want to think about. And the first one is that women are not capable of being scientific leaders. And I think we have plenty of evidence in this room that that is not the case. I'd hope you'd all agree with that. But I think it's important that you remember that there are people that do think this. Okay, and that's something to bear in mind when you're making your plans and when you're trying to bring everyone along with you in creating an inclusive research environment. But I'm not really going to talk about this anymore, but I am going to talk about 2 other reasons. So another possible reason why we don't have women in senior leadership positions is they see it and they go, no thanks. So that's about, what says about the culture and the environment. They're very capable, but they go, that's not for me. I'm going to do something that actually I'm going to really enjoy because that's not going to be enjoyable for me. So that's something that we will think about and talk about today. And then the third reason is there are people who kind of go, women who really want to be scientific leaders, who go, I know there's lots of challenges, but I'm going to do this. And they still don't get there. And so there must be something in the way. There are some barriers there. So that's what we're mostly going to focus on, is what those barriers are. And many of you will be familiar with those barriers. And then I guess what we need to discuss is, does it matter? I mean, so you know, we do great science, right? All our organizations do fantastic science, and we don't have very many women leaders, so it's fine, right? It's all good, it's fine. But maybe you might want to rethink about that, and as much as I think there's increasing evidence, and there's going to be, I think, more evidence coming out, but I don't want to predict the future, that actually diversity does matter. Diversity is good for science. It changes the type of science you do. So those of you who are familiar with the sex and gender dimension of research, which is a kind of always, I think, an interesting term for thinking about the equality of research outcomes, depends on who's doing that research. Another topic of discussion, which I won't really talk about today, is the fact that that research outcomes aren't equal. So we mostly focus on male models of disease in preclinical work, and so therefore the research outcomes that come out of that are relevant to this section of the community of society, but not to this section. So we're ignoring a lot of society when we're thinking about our research, and actually it's not maybe surprising that women tend not to ignore that so much. They're much more likely to think about sex when they're designing their experiments and analysing their data. They're much more likely to use sex as an independent variable for that data. So it changes. So having different people coming into the science changes the way you think and has many more different perspectives on that problem. And that's, you know, got to be a good thing. And there's evidence to suggest that that's the case. So this is citation count, depending on increasing levels of diversity. And this is with ethnicity, with age, with gender, and also affiliation. So diversity does matter. So I'd encourage you not to be left behind. So we think there's some barriers to diversity. So the question is, how do we recognise those barriers? And it looks like you're well placed to identify them. Because this is exactly what it seems like you're doing. And this is what we've done at Babraham. We've looked at our data, both staff and student data. We've carried out surveys. We've also carried out consultations, and they're really useful. So we aim every 2 years to talk to about a quarter of our staff and students. So it's really labour intensive, but allows you to really dig a little bit deeper and get some more personal stories and perspectives that you won't really get from like an online survey. And we do focus groups, particularly on at those career stages where we feel they're particularly vulnerable. We also encourage people to sort of be aware of their own unconscious biases. So I'm sure most of you in the room are familiar with the concept of unconscious bias. It's basically a survival tactic that your brain has learnt patterns. And in order for you to just, you know, get in your car every day and drive to work, you don't have to rethink the fact that, yes, the wheels will go round. You just learn. You make a shortcut in your brain. And these are unconscious biases. We don't think about it. It's a survival strategy. However, it makes it great for most of the time. But when you're making important decisions, those unconscious biases that make you think, what do I think about of a scientist? Ooh, it looks like Einstein, it's a man, it's a white man. So those unconscious biases come into your decision making. And I'll put my hands up. So when I've done the implicit association test, so you can Google this, it's a test by Harvard. It's not perfect, but it's a good kind of indication of what your unconscious biases might be. And so I am guilty. So I have a strong unconscious bias where I associate women with the home and men with the workplace. So that is probably as a result of my upbringing. My dad went to work and my mum stayed at home and looked after the children. So that might explain where those unconscious biases come from, but I'm aware of them. So when I'm making an important decision about recruitment, I kind of think, am I choosing this person because they look like me, or this is who I assume a scientist looks like, or who a support staff looks like? Or am I actually making sure that I'm making the right decision here and choosing this person for the right reasons? So we'll talk about a little bit more about that a bit later. And as I say, just talking to people and listening and hearing their stories, there's nothing like a good anecdote, and there's plenty of them about, to really engage people and identify where those barriers are and identify some of the assumptions that people make. So these are some of the barriers that we've identified in our organisation, and I'll take you through them. But one of the challenging ones that we're really increasingly coming up against at our organization is the scientific ecosystem. So within an organization, you can make so many changes. However, we found that we're butting up against the system. You know, the system that evaluates us and our science and what it judges excellence to be and how it judges that. And that's a really tough thing to change. However, as I'm sure many of you in the room, I'm not one to lie down and just go, oh, well, I can't do anything about it. I'm ambitious that we can change the scientific ecosystem as well. We can talk about that a little bit later as well. So going through some of the barriers that we've looked at Babraham Institute, and then I'll go through some of the actions we've taken to try and address those barriers and what the impact has been. So decision making. Let's go back again. So as many of the echelons, the top echelons of organizations, the decision makers tend to look a bit like this, so all male. So how it's very difficult to be empathic with someone who has a completely different experience to you, or to comprehend how they can have a different experience when you haven't lived it yourself. And so if you have people who've had a very similar experience for one reason or another, be it their gender or ethnicity or sexuality, how can they even realize what the challenges are for people who are different to them? So it's super important to have different people around the table at the top. And provide role models. So we know that if you can't see it, you can't be it. How do you know to become something that you don't know is possible for you? So really within decision making, it's increasing awareness about the fact that we need diversity at this level, and then to carry out some actions as a result of it. So family leaves are another barrier. This is a challenging one because it's difficult when you're out of the workforce for a year, however long. So certainly in the UK, people can come back to their job after a year. In our organisation, they get paid maternity leave for 9 months. And we also have shared paternity leave. However, there's very low uptake of shared paternity leave. So it's not just the time away from work, it's the time when you sort of wind down and then the time it takes to reintegrate. It obviously does have an effect on promotion and pay. And there needs to be increasing awareness around parental leave, not just maternity leave. And obviously this is impacting on the gender pay gap that we see. So that's another barrier. Work-life balance is another barrier to potentially people wanting to become a scientific leader. Be it family pressures or other pressures, other interests outside life. Heaven forbid you admit to having interests outside of the lab. But it's also thinking about the mental load, not just the workload, but the mental load. And thinking about whether there's people who are doing one shift during the day in the workplace and also another shift when they come home. Right? There's a lot of people. In many places, it tends to be women who have 2 jobs. So it is thinking about gender equality in the home, which allows for gender equality in the workplace. Obviously, the cost and availability of childcare is a real issue. It doesn't come cheap, but it really has a massive impact on allowing parents to engage in the workplace. Culture and awareness, and this is something that we'll talk about quite a bit later about what we've done at the Institute, but you do get gender stereotyping from birth. So you see that it's very, be it with colours, which was the pink and blue thing, it's a Victorian idea about labelling children in colours, which is kind of interesting. But it really does impact the children, both what they experience from their parents, their wider family, and broader society. So girls and boys generally don't see any differences until they're about 6 or 7. And then you get really stark differences in their self-perception. And they really think differently about themselves, and girls start describing themselves as nice, and boys just start describing themselves as brilliant. And that just keeps going. So that graph, when you see those descriptions, just keep going as they develop and mature. And of course that impacts on how people feel about themselves when they're going into the workplace. Whether they're going into a job that they feel they need to be brilliant, or they're going into a job where they feel they need to be nice. And that starts at a really early age. So there's a lack of awareness about gender stereotyping. And again, it's understanding your own unconscious biases around that. Recruitment is an interesting barrier, which we'll talk about how we got over some of these with Libra a little bit later. But there is a tendency to recruit in your own image. You see yourself in someone, and that feels great, right? You can see yourself in someone. Again, unconscious bias plays a role. The diversity in decision-making plays a role. The language you use in job adverts plays a huge role. So whether the language you use in an advert where it talks about competitive, world-leading, or whether it talks about, being able to be collaborative and carry out excellent science, it really does impact on who you're attracting. And surely you don't want the language to limit your talent pool and your applicant pool. So think about language. Just awareness about getting recruitment right has a massive impact on your organisation. So being aware of that, and just being aware of what certainly has been referred to as the old boys club, or just networking. Just thinking about your networks, who's in your networks, and what impact that has. So it is thinking about potentially widening your network, and also thinking about your behaviour. So you go to in the UK, we go to the pub maybe on a Friday night. You end up drinking with someone who happens to be there because they can be there on a Friday night. They don't have any other responsibilities on a Friday evening. And then you discover that they're looking for the next job, and you happen to know someone who has a position available. And then you kind of, there's these people. Circumstance enables their progression, as opposed to the fact that they're really good. They may well be really, really good, but who knows whether they're really the best person. So just think about the impact of your actions on people and who's doing the science. Promotion is another aspect that leads to some barriers. So again, we have promoting in your own image. Unconscious bias plays a role. Diversity in the decision-making playing a role. Accessibility to promotion and the understanding of promotion processes plays a role. And there's this element of whether people feel confident enough to ask for promotion. So in your organisations, does everyone need to ask for promotion, or is everyone considered? Just automatically considered, and then sort of people recognise going, oh yeah, they are great, they need to be promoted. Yeah, we really need to develop them, they have great potential. So just think about who you're promoting. Is it the people who are prepared to go and ask for it? Or is it the people who are worthy? And those people might be the same. I don't know. You need to answer that question. Again, networking and sponsorship plays a real role in promoting. Think about who you are choosing, and recognise that you are choosing to advocate for people when you do it. Career development and training. So just the availability of training. We find something really interesting in Baber Institute. We find that women access training an awful lot more than men. And this is something we're trying to understand, and we haven't got to the bottom of it yet. But I don't know whether it's men are too, they're busy getting on with it and can do it, have a natural ability, don't feel they need any training, or whether it is women sort of thinking stereotypically, oh, I need all the help I can get. We don't know. We have no idea, and that's very stereotypical thinking. But making sure that everyone training is available and the appropriate training is available for everybody. And just think about whether you've got training that is aiming to fix the women, or whether you have any training that is to fix the men. I haven't seen any training to fix the men. I've seen lots of training, assertiveness training for women, get to learn to stand like this. I haven't seen so much training for men not to take up so much space when they're sitting in a bus, or dominating conversations, or taking a woman's idea from a meeting and getting the recognition for it. I haven't seen any training for that. It may exist in your organisations. I'll look forward to hearing about it. But yeah, think about fixing your system rather than about fixing the individuals. And then, again, sponsorship and mentoring. is an important aspect. So there's a number of barriers, but if you sort of chip at them one by one, I think you can make a difference. I don't want you to go away, and particularly the women in the room, I don't want you to go away thinking, oh, this is it, right, I should definitely bail out now. Because I think there is, lots of things that people are doing, and the evidence of everybody in the room here is that people are really increasingly realizing that this is really important for scientific research, that we get the best people in there, irrespective of gender. But it does mean that when you add up all these different areas, you do get quite a lot of barriers that you can see would prevent people from engaging in scientific research. And this is within a sort of institutional setting. When you think about the system, and I'm going to kind of go through this quite quickly, but there's lots of evidence that there's many other ways where there are more and more barriers just getting in the way of great people doing great science because of the way the system's set up. Whether that's authorship, whether that's the culture of science, how it affects different people, whether it's self-perception, and we've talked about that a little bit earlier, whether you feel that you're, the right type of person to go into research. This is one of my favourites. So you're more likely to be called Dave and be involved in a collaboration in Australia than you are to be a woman and involved in a collaboration. So think about who you are asking to as you're inviting as your collaborators. Are you really choosing the best people, or is it choosing the people that you happen to know that are already in your network? And are they called Dave? Whether it's about people's awareness of their body. So women, as many of you I'm sure know, are really scrutinized for how they look like. Men, not so much. And that causes people to hold back and stops them. The culture can really impact on different people. The language, we talked about this, language and adverts really make a difference to how you are, to your applicant pool. So I think actually a speaker recently here talked about how there's evidence to suggest that when you have a job advert out there and you have criteria that you want the applicant to meet. So a man typically applying will meet, if you have 10 criteria, if he meets 3, he will apply. Whereas a woman will not apply unless she meets most of those criteria. So think about when you're setting up a job advert, those criteria. Are they really essential criteria? Because you are limiting your applicant pool by saying they need to tick all these boxes. Think about making some of them essential. Of course, some of them are essential. You might need someone to have a PhD, fair enough, or experience in a certain area, fair enough. But all the others, are they more like desirable that they should have experience of leadership and experience of this, that, and the other? So think about how you structure it and how you can widen your applicant pool so you can make sure that you really are getting the best person, not just the person who thinks, yeah, I'm going to go for that. Again, gender, also you have race, you have actual discrimination based on these protected characteristics. We talked a little bit about sharing the load, the fact that women are often doing twice a double shift, so they work in the workplace and they work at home as well. So think about how you can encourage better behaviour in your own groups with your staff in that respect. Again, we talked about brilliance. So there's different messages that between men and women. People talk more about men being brilliant than women, whereas I'd hope you'd agree that actually they're equally capable of being equally brilliant. The different types of jobs that we give people in our organisations. So who looks after the students in your organisation? Who's the person that someone who's feeling a bit rubbish and is struggling, who's the person that they go to? I know in our organisation, there's a couple of women that people go to. And there's not so many men. And so people are not only trying to do their research, but these women are also trying to deal with sorting out all the other problems that other staff are having. And it sort of lands on the desk of a few people, and it often tends to be women. So think about how that load is distributed. Harassment's a big one. And how can you do your job when you're facing harassment? And it needs to be, assessed. It's tricky. It's really tricky how you address this, how you assess this, how you identify it, and what you do about it. But it isn't acceptable under any means. Who you're inviting as a speaker, So there's a disparity, obviously, in conferences often. There's the flip side of this is that women are often inundated, because there's fewer senior women, they are inundated with roles. They're asked to be on panels and on interview committees and in other committees and asked to be at conferences. And so it's difficult sometimes to get some balance in your speakers at conferences that you're organising, but it is possible. It absolutely is possible. And there's even databases of women scientists out there that you can just go and look at to find if you're really struggling. And be creative. Do you really need a senior person, or can actually you ask someone who's a little bit more junior, and you're more likely to find a woman who is a little bit more junior. So be creative in your solutions. So we often think about the two-body problem when we're recruiting. And while we're recruiting a man, we don't worry about what the wife or the girlfriend does at all. But when we're recruiting a woman who has a husband or a boyfriend, we are overly concerned because we're really worried that they won't come, and they often don't come. So this is a real issue around the fact that there's certainly a perception that men are less likely to move for their wife's job compared to the other way around. There's also the biases around when we get CVs. So there's a classic piece of research that says, so when Jane puts in a CV versus James, both men and women are more likely to offer James the job, and they will give James a higher salary than Jane, even though those CVs are completely identical apart from those names. And that is true for race as well. There are biases. Bias does exist. It is real. Recommendation letters, think about when you're getting them and also when you're writing them. There are big differences in the words people use when they're writing reference letters. And then in the area that I'm involved in grant reviewers, so there is bias. So when you have gender-blind applications, women are more successful and get more money than when they're not gender-blind. So quite a few barriers, both at an institution or individual level and then at a systemic level. But I think, as I say, we need to chip away at them, and then we can make a difference. So some of the things that we've been doing in our organisation with regard to recruitment. So this was developed as part of our Horizon 2020 Libra project, and I'd really recommend it, actually. It's available online. It has some great and quite detailed suggestions on how to have unbiased recruitment. So it talks about some of the things that we've talked about here, the advert, the language, having oversight from someone who's removed from the process, train people in how to recruit. People aren't born knowing how to do recruitment. Do provide training. Think about having the same questions for everybody. Train people on unconscious bias. So we, at our organisation, we send this really good unconscious bias video from the Royal Society, which isn't about gender, but it just demonstrates how your brain makes assumptions and takes shortcuts. So train people to kind of think about this and make them aware. Think about putting in the commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion as part of the person specification. So we do this, and in fact, in every interview, we ask the applicants a question about equality. And obviously, the question depends on what role they're applying to. So if it's a junior role, we ask people going, are you aware of the challenges around inequality, in the sciences? And then whereas a senior role, we'd expect someone to have been actively engaged in tackling gender equalities. And so this has had a real impact. People have not got the job because of the answer that they have given to this question. And it means that the person that's applying knows that this is important to you. It's an important value for your organisation, and you know that the person that's coming into your organisation shares that value. So if it really is central to your mission, then you need to check it out at the beginning and make sure you're very honest and open about that. And similarly to what you were saying earlier, we halt recruitment when there's a single gender shortlist. We stop and we start again. So some of the impacts we've had, so we've completely changed our job adverts. Some of them used to look like this, and now they look more like this, making them more attractive. Some of the actions we've done in promotion, we've improved the level of engagement with annual appraisals, so the meetings for all staff with the line managers about how things are going. We give both appraisers and appraisees training. We give people a conscious bias training. We have a senior committee that reviews all staff for promotion. Rather than just waiting for someone to step forward going, promote me, we actually look at everybody and really think about who should be promoted. We have clearer guidelines and criteria, and we're very, we promote those and make people more aware of them, and we have diversity on our panels, on our promotion panels. And this is having an impact. So we've measured, we've asked people their understanding of appraisal processes in 2014, 2016, and as you can see, so men are purple, women are green. We see a greater increase of understanding of our processes, and similarly for promotion, we see an increase, particularly for women, an increase in the understanding of promotion processes. There's still some people that we're missing, obviously, there's some gaps at the top here, but we are making a difference. So now we have gender balanced promotions, and it seems that our working patterns or career breaks don't seem to affect success. So of those promoted, 40% were part-time staff in 2016, and also we had staff who were on or just come back from parental leave who were promoted. Thinking about family leaves, there's lots of things that we have thought about. Some of them that you've touched on in your talk earlier, and I'm sure others will have. One of the things that is really visible, because it's really visible to outsiders as well, to visitors, is, again, men have been discriminated against for years in not being able to change their children's nappies. Not having the facilities. They're able to do it, but not having the facilities to do it. And this is something that has had a real impact, actually, particularly with the visitors to our organisation, that we have put baby change facilities in both male and female toilets. It just also gives people a little hint that, it is possible, both gender or all genders are capable of changing nappies. And it's that sharing the load, just giving people little nudges in the right direction. So, as I say, as part of our Athenas Swan application, we are required to demonstrate impact. And so we do think a bit about how we do that. And so that's why we talk to people a lot. And we use what they say to demonstrate the fact that actually what we're doing is having an impact. And so this was a facility head who was on parental leave. And some of the activities that we did in order to facilitate anyone coming back from parental leave, clearly had an impact. She found the organisation was very supportive. Decision-making. So I think the most important thing here, and I think there's evidence by who is in the room today, is that certainly in your organisations you have this commitment from senior leaders in order to bring about change. If you do not have commitment at that senior level, you will not, or you will really struggle to bring about change. Because they're the ones that hold the purse strings, they're the ones that really dictate what kind of culture and what the organisation looks like. So I think that's one of the most important things. But having money really helps. So it really makes a difference. We wouldn't be able to do what we do unless we had someone, full-time person, driving this project, as well as all the voluntary contributions we get from other members of staff as part of our E4S team. There's a real challenge with gender balance on committees and panels, because there is that balancing act of not overloading women, the few senior women that might be in your organisation. So that is a tricky one. Thinking again about being more creative about who you ask to be on your committees. Are there some senior postdocs that you can include, women senior postdocs that you can include on your committees? So think creatively about how to solve some of these problems. So I'm pleased that equality and diversity is really considered in policies and decision-making at our organisation. So we have a massive review of all our policies at the moment, and there's a team of people doing that, and our equality, diversity and inclusion manager is part of that team. So all the policies are looked at through a equality and inclusive lens. And And we have got some improvement in representation on committees, but we've still got a long way to go. We are by no means perfect. So we actually led the work package in the Libra project on work-life balance. And so we've done quite a lot of activity in this area. And so one of the things that we've done is just highlighting the many things that goes on in our organisation to people that people just aren't necessarily aware of. The fact that we have a cash machine, you know, at the Institute, we're in the middle of the countryside, so cash machines are a really big thing. But it makes life a bit easier, right? Just anything that we do, you know, we try to do things that just make everyone's life just a little bit easier. And one of the things that we've developed over the last few years is a formal work-life balance and flexible working policy. We had some informal arrangements, but that means only the people that, you know, happen to know about them or are lucky enough to be in a group where the group leader, you know, works flexibly as well, can know about it. Whereas this is formalised and highly promoted and is available to staff that from day one. So a lot of organisations wait for people to be there for 6 months before they let them work flexibly, whereas that could stop somebody coming to your organisation because they really need to be at the school gate at whatever time. And so, yeah, we've asked people, how they feel about work-life balance. And so people, when we ask them, they say, you know, what's important is the ability to work part-time, work flexibly, have a nursery, have access to remote working. We ask them, you know, what challenges do you find affect you personally, so whether it's work-life balance, competition, or required mobility in science. We don't see too much differences between men and women. The only difference really is in slightly more women see work-life balance as an issue. And we ask them lots of questions, and the important thing is we look at the data by dissecting it by gender. And we don't see many differences apart from the fact that women use their holiday allowance more than men, or at least they record their holiday allowance more than men. But we haven't been able to encourage everybody to always record their allowance. However, we have highlighted the fact that holiday is really important. I know as a second-year PhD student, I made the mistake of not going on holiday, and it was a real mistake. Breaks are important. It puts everything into perspective. And so we highlighted this, actually, to the fact that, you know, for everyone's well-being and good mental health, it's important to get away. And we also discovered that actually fewer women felt there were appropriate tools available for working from home, and that's an action, and that's something that we're working on as well, making tools available and also making everyone aware that those tools are available. So this is one of my favourite activities. One of my favourite activities that we did in the Libra project. We designed posters in order to be a little bit provocative and to just make people think about a few issues. So things like the fact that you know, many fathers feel they didn't take enough time off during the birth of their child, and so, you know, getting people and institutions to think, you know, how can we make that go away? You know, that's awful to think that people, you know, that fathers have, you know, felt that they can't spend enough time in those early days, those really important days. Highlighting the fact that women take on 2.5 times more unpaid work. So this is think about who in your group always seems to be taking their children to the dentist and the doctor, who stays at home when their children are sick, or whether they're caring for elderly relatives. So who's taking this unpaid load? And just think about it in, you know, your own sphere and in wider spheres. And my favourite, however, is poster that we generated was the fact that daughters' career aspirations are positively correlated with the amount of housework their father does. Okay, so what does your daughter want to be? Okay, so these are posters that we designed to go on toilet doors. And these have been used in the Libra Consortium and more widely. And the joy of using toilet doors is you have a captive audience. And we only have them up for a week. We only put them up for a week and we take them down because it's really easy to ignore things that you see all the time. And so this has been definitely provoked a lot of conversation. Not always good, all conversations I think are good conversations, but people, you know, necessarily didn't like what they were reading and were, you know, really questioning, but at least it involved people and it got people engaging in the topics, which was really important. Okay, so other things that we've done as far as work-life balance, we've developed a carers policy. We make sure that meetings are in core hours. There's no rocket science here at all. We try and avoid, you know, big things happening in school holidays. Claire is a great example of one of the things we've done where we support job sharing. So Claire Senner and Sarah Burge were postdocs at the organisation, and Claire worked for 3 days and Sarah worked for 3 days, and they shared the role. And Claire is a great example of how part-time working doesn't have to affect your career. She's won a prestigious fellowship and has now gone on to the university to take up a more independent position. So think about creative ways of working that will help different people to come into the workplace. We really promote role models. As I said earlier, it's really important that you get men talking about gender equality. So we have a series called My Life in Science, where we get both women and men to come and talk about their science, but also what their circumstances are and how they have overcome some barriers and challenges and how they manage to integrate their life with their science. And as I say, we have quite great visibility of the people who work flexibly in our organisation, and to help promote and make it open to everybody. So this has resulted in, over time, people being much more aware of our work-life balance practices at the organisation. And it's nice when you hear people saying this. You can see that what you're doing really has an impact. So just thinking about culture and awareness, there's a lot of things going on. We have a blog. We take part in sort of other research involved in gender. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We're very visible in our celebration of our achievements in gender equality. We take part in, this was a European Researchers' Night as part of, we brought the Libra project. What we did is we went and we read stories to children, and stories that that bust gender stereotypes. So not so many of the books about building for boys and princesses for girls, but things that we promote books that, as I say, go away from those stereotypes. And we've also, this is a paper that came out last year, which actually echoed something that we see in our organisation. So we just collect data about what we see, and we notice that women don't ask as many questions in seminars, and that actually has an impact. In as much as if you're at a conference and you're a woman and you're not asking questions, you are not being visible. So even though you're thinking of a really cool question, you are less likely to ask it as a woman, and I know that from personal experience. And but you're not visible, so no one's going to spot you and go, oh, that's a really smart person, because that was a really cool question. And so it's really important. So we're creating an environment at the Institute where women feel, and this happens for junior staff as well, so they feel more confident in asking questions, and so that hopefully in that sort of safe environment they develop that confidence, so that when they go into a bigger arena, so more international conferences, they can speak up. We have a library which has some really cool books in it, and we can share all our kind of titles that we have, and people really engage with that. And we also get involved with other organisations. So EDIS is an organisation in the UK that was initiated by the CRIC in London and GSK and the Wellcome Trust, one of our main funders. And its aim is it's equality, diversity and inclusion in science and the life science in science and health. And it brings together more people together, a bit like you're doing in SOMMa, because I think we need to develop a critical mass to address some of these problems, some of the more systemic problems. And when we have a critical mass, we're more effective at lobbying and bringing about change. And we're also involved in Stonewall, which is an organisation which promotes the inclusion of LGBTQ+ staff as well. Our director is very visible in his support for gender equality. This is an article he wrote in Febs, which highlights this. Which is really important. We make use of every day. It's really good. There's lots of days out there, so International Day of Women and Girls, or International Men's Day or International Women's Day. They're useful, particularly for social media. They're useful hooks to deliver an event or put across a message. So last International Men's Day, we focused on the men juggling the family and work. Whereas on International Women's Day, we looked at how things have changed in both gender equality and science over the decades, a real sort of celebration that we are moving in the right direction. So more impact that people, particularly women, there's been they've got a more positive perception of the culture at the Institute. And again, we've got some way to go, but things are going in the right direction. So this is a study we took part in, which just highlights the fact that it's really difficult to understand someone else's perspective. And men and women do have different perspectives, and it's important to gather those perspectives when you're making decisions. So this was a study that covered 8,000, had 8,000 participants from about 50 or 60 different organizations, which we were one of. And so the outer rings show the entire data, whereas we are the inner data here. So the question was, does the culture of your workplace lead to women encountering more challenges than men in advancing their careers? And the data is divided by men and women. And so maybe not surprisingly, more women in both our organisation and in the wider survey felt that yes, the workplace and the culture does impact more on women and provides more challenges for women than it does men. But what's interesting is that the men, much fewer of them see this. So they have a different, they don't see what the women see and experience. And this is a really interesting one. It's about double standards. So are women judged more negatively when they behave in the same way as men? And we were quite shocked, actually, at the data that came out of our organisation, because 2/3 of women in our organisation felt that there were double standards, that they were judged more harshly for the same behaviour as men, whereas men just do not see this at all. Very few men recognise that this is a thing. And so it's really important to think about perspectives, to think about your perspective and recognise that it's different from someone else's perspective because they have a different experience. And our inclusivity goes beyond gender. So we celebrated LGBT STEM Day, the first one was last year, and we celebrated it again this year, where we took an opportunity to distribute rainbow lanyards to indicate that you were an LGBT ally, and just generally highlighting and making people aware that there are barriers also to the LGBT community to coming into research. And again, don't restrict your applicant pool by making it not an attractive environment for them to be involved. So what can you do? So obviously at an institution level, you can continue what you're doing, develop appropriate data collection tools. And this isn't easy, this is really hard. Really good data collection tools are expensive. But Excel is okay too, but it makes it much harder. And once you've got your data, really look at it and really analyse it. Take a really critical look at it. You're all very good as researchers. You're all very good at analysing data. This is just another data set. And do listen, gather opinion, increase that awareness to make people aware that this is a thing. It's not going to go away by itself unless we all sort of get on board and realise that there's a problem and we all have a role to play in getting rid of the problem. Invest. Put some money into it, put some time into it, and actually just care. Realise that it is impacting on you. It impacts on everybody. Commit to a plan. So our plan is in our Athenas Swan application that's available on our website. I think it has about 100 action points divided into various different sections. We are well on our way with many of those things, but make it realistic. It's very easy to develop a really ambitious plan that actually everyone loses sight of, but make it real. So some people have challenged our action plan in our organisation because they were like, oh yeah, that was a great aspiration. I'm like, no, this wasn't an aspiration plan. This was an action plan. So stay committed, deliver on your action plan. And then obviously deliver appropriate changes, because a diverse workforce, I really do think, and I hopefully have convinced you, leads to greater productivity and a more efficient business, and our business is science and scientific excellence. So as far as individuals are concerned, be aware of your own biases. Go away and Google the implicit association test and take it. You can take it for all sorts of different things, for your over race, over gender, over, as I say, whether like me, you might find you have strong unconscious biases or not, and no one's to blame. There's no blame going on here, but you do have a responsibility to be aware of those unconscious biases and think about how that impacts on the decisions that you're making. Question those biases, and as I say, whether you're making decisions about grants, recruiting, whether you're chairing something, when you're chairing a committee, who do you go to? Are you including everybody? Are all the voices in the room heard? Whether you're organising an event, attending an event, writing a reference or buying presents for children. So, you know, make sure you're not reinforcing those gender stereotypes in those early ages. Give your opinions. Your organisation needs your opinions. They don't know if there's a problem unless you tell them there's a problem. Act as a role model. Provide your organisation with data. We really struggle with getting ethnicity data from people. We got about ethnicity data from about a third of our staff. We've now had a real drive, and that's increased to 2/3. But again, we can't analyse the data if we don't have it. Share the load, and call out bad behaviour. It's very easy to sit and watch, and it's hard to call out bad behaviour. But if you don't, then it just persists, right? And then in the broader sort of scientific ecosystem, you're doing the first one, right, already. Join forces with other organisations, amplify your voice, share your ideas and initiatives, which we're doing, increase broader awareness, lobby, and get involved with policy making. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for the opportunity to give a long talk. I'm really looking forward to hearing your shorter talks. I really want to thank the team that's behind all of this. So this is our Equality for Success team at the Institute, and Elizabeth Wynne is our current Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager, who really drives all these initiatives together with many people from throughout the organisation, and particularly in our HR department as well. There's a real commitment there to bring about change. And our aim is to make it a better working environment for all these people. So thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Cheryl. Again, impressive talk. We are a little bit behind schedule, but I think it's worth it to have at least 2 questions for Cheryl, and then we continue with the agenda.
Silenced everyone. Hi.
We have microphones, please.
Do you make these seminars because you said that the senior people in the institute is really important to carry out all the progress, let's say. So did you make them mandatory? Because these are like something that you can come or not, and you said that women tend to go more often than males. But as you mentioned, most of the chiefs or PIs are men. So I guess it's important to know in your institution, how do you make this? Are they voluntary? Are they mandatory? Or
so they're not mandatory. I mean, it's a really good question because there's no point converting to preaching to the converted. So that we're all wasting our time there. So how we've managed to do this is combine the science with some of these issues. So everyone will come for the science, I think, and we have evidence that people do come for the science, and then they learn some of the lessons too. So while we are trying to give out the message that gender equality is for everybody, yeah, absolutely, it is a real problem that generally it's still seen as a women's issue, but we hide it in there. So it's thinking creatively at how to get more people in the room and get more diversity in the room. But it's a good question.
One more question. Okay. I think they are all impressed without words. Okay, we are going to move to the next section of our event. It's going to be short talks from SOMMa directors and responsibles of the gender offices of the SOMMa centers. The first talk is going to be, well, before I introduce the speakers, there is only 5-minute time for speakers. I will stand up at minute 4 so you can start wrapping up so we don't go over time. First speaker is going to be Maria Blasco, director of the Spanish National Cancer Research Center.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Cheryl, for the fantastic talk. I think you will see that we are doing less things than you are doing. So I start with this quote by Virginia Woolf's book, A Room of One's Own, because in this paragraph, she says that, well, it's not important to talk about the nature of women or about the nature of literature, in her case. I would say the same. It's not important to talk about the nature of women and the nature of science, but how can you make more women to have their own labs, right? And I would say this, a lab of one's own, is one of the things we should achieve, that more women really reach the top of the scientific career. Because we have this kind of a scenario. I think this is in Spain, it's similar in other countries. You can see that more women start in the training, but at the end, as in the highest levels of research, women are lost. We have heard from Cheryl, so I'll go fast, about the causes of this. You have the gender biases that favor males. This is the famous study that Cheryl also mentioned. This is something also Cheryl referred to, alluded to, which is this is telling us that these gender biases emerge very, very early. So girls, when they are 7, already have the perception that they are less brilliant than boys, and this was not there when they were 5. So this is something that starts very, very early. This is our gender gap at the CNIO. So we have more women than men. When you go to the level of unit or group head, then you have more men than women. And this is interesting. We did an interesting study because the level is, sorry, is in Spanish that says investigador, is like a staff scientist. This is not an independent position. I mean, it's not an independent group leader, but it's the maximum level that you can achieve before being an independent group leader. Actually, you cannot be an independent group leader if you are inside the institution. I mean, we want to take people from outside to avoid inbreeding. But if you measure the time, women stay in this investigator level before jumping to an independent position, women tend to be for longer time. So this means that more women need to lean in, to take the step to become independent group leaders. And we heard about all the reasons for this. I won't go into that. I think we had a fantastic presentation by Cheryl. And I will tell you what we are doing. So in 2012, we established the CNIO Women in Science Office. First, to recognize the problem, to be aware of these gender stereotypes and gender imbalances, and try to correct this with changes at the CNIO. So this is our webpage. You can see Women in Science is at the center. So we are telling, this is important for us, and I think this is one of the main missions to say that this is important for us, and we have to do things. These are the volunteers at the CNIO that are collaborating in the WISE office that is headed by Isabel López de Silanes, and we have a work and life balance group and seminars and events group. We are also very active in that regard. And this is a summary of the things we have been doing since we established this office. We have flexible work hours, and this is very important. You will see the impact that it had. Strategic meetings at the CNIO are no later than 6 p.m. 50% women speakers in our distinguished seminars or CNIO Frontiers meetings, which are very prestigious. 50% women in evaluation panels. Women get an extra year before evaluation as group leaders per maternity leave. We have a kindergarten that is partially supported by the CNIO, an equality plan that we work with the Works Council. We're implementing now the telework or remote working. This is something also very important. And we have an ethical code of conduct that reflects this issue of gender biases and gender gap. So this is the impact of the flexible working hours. You can see this was implemented in 2015. You can see the number of men and women that took part-time job at the CNIO, and you can see how the number women were taking more of these part-time positions, and now how this has been decreased a lot, almost. More similar to the men, and I think this is the impact of having flexible working hours. There was this article in Nature about what can you do to facilitate the life of women in academia. This is, for us, has been an inspiration. Actually, we were doing some of these things, but there has been an inspiration to prepare the quality plan at the CNIO, where we collect all these things and other things that we were already doing. And I think the seminar of Cheryl, reflects all of these things, so we are also moving in that direction. I will be finishing, Isabel, I think. One important part is to talk about gender bias and to talk about this. This is a problem. And we have every month a seminar, so Cheryl was part of this seminar series, but we had politicians, musicians, you name it, that come here to the CNIO. We invite secondary schools to attend these seminars because we think it's important that young boys and girls are listening to these women to break these stereotypes. You can see here María Teresa Fernández de la Vega, former vice president of the government, Luz Casal, philosopher, writer, and we invite all these in this case is an initiative which is called STEM Talent Girls. So these are girls that attend to this initiative that I will show you also. This is a writer, Elvira Sastre, a poet. Here at the CNIO, we make exhibitions. This was the Maria Slodowska-Curie exhibition that we took here. We also always celebrate the March 11th. We had a representation of Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own here by Clara Sanchez. It's a fantastic adaptation to a monologue of the Virginia Woolf's. And we include gender really in every initiative. So we celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. We have another initiative which is called CNIO on the City, which are lab immersions for students and teachers. And we also produce videos. We produced one for women in science that actually was finalist in our award and was mentioned by El País. And in general, in everything we do at the CNIO, we include this perspective of gender. We have another initiative called CNIO Art, and we are using this opportunity also to invite girls to this initiative and try to break these stereotypes. And we were the Madrid location for STEM Talent Girl, which is an initiative to promote STEM careers for girls. And we had here many of the CEOs of the main IBEX companies in Spain. You can see them here. And we also are part of this Women for Africa initiative. We receive women from African countries to do sabbaticals at the CNIO. And I will finish here because I run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now is the turn for Patrizia Ziveri, is the Scientific Director of the Institute of Environmental Science and Technology.
So great talk, thanks. It was really inspiring. Thank you very much for your talk. So I want to start sharing the experience that we had at the Institute of Environmental Science and Technology. And I will start saying that we are a public body, so that's already a very different situation, for example, the CNIO, because we depend on the university policy, basically on the equity plan, gender equity plan of the university. And basically, in fact, this issue of gender was a bit hidden in our institute. It was there, but there was not very much discussion about it. And I think since the Maria de Maestro and the grant we got with being a unit of excellence, actually we started to be much more aware. I mean, in the women and the female colleagues, this was already there, but I think it has been implemented much more in our male colleagues. And actually, since 2016, we organized a lot of different actions. And most of them were mainly participatory actions, so try to really share experience, try to basically improve the awareness in the Institute. So in terms of gender distributions, as mentioned before, we have a very classical situation where actually most of our colleagues actually are females, going from 80% in the administrations to around 60% for postdocs and PhDs. And then if you move up and for seniors or group leaders, then we are about 35%. And a part of these numbers, I mean, what we discussed were actually the challenges, what are actually the big work that we have to do in order to, in a way, make this gender equality not just the numbers, but also in terms of workload, work balance, and so on. So one thing that I think it was very good after this workshop on participatory workshop. What we are doing also, we do this focus group with different group of people in our institute, going from the administration to the PhD and postdocs and at the senior level. And then with this focus group that are run by professional people, so we don't do this by ourselves, but people that work on genders issues. We are actually discussing in workshop and trying to also do more implementations of actions. And for example, so one thing that we did, we try more and more, to see the benefit of gender diversity in our institute, and also gender science. So in the sense, we are a center of environmental science. We work a lot on climate change, and now more and more we have, for example, project dealing with the gender perspective on climate change, for example, in Africa, in West Africa, in developing countries or not. And I think this has also improved much more the visibility of the issue and the problems, and now we can basically deal with this issue and improve. Also, we try more and more to support women that have family, to have this balance between family and work. The issue a bit is the budget, because we don't really have a budget for this, and I think it will be really, really important that we plan and we have a budget dedicated to support this kind of action. Also, we do a lot of training, different type of trainings, from career development, but also considering the gender issues. And I think I was quite brief, but it is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrizia. Now is the turn for José Luis Richman, Director of the Research Centers of Agrigenomic in Barcelona. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for organizing this event. Okay, so at CRAG, for us, let's see. How does this work? Oops, I did something wrong. Para pasarlo. Okay. All right, so at CRAG, when we started looking into this 5 years ago, the starting point was not necessarily bad, in that we had 33% of our group leaders were female, and also in the internal survey that we did for the Human Resources Excellence in Research Award by the European Commission, gender balance was in the first quartile of the 40 topics that we surveyed. But we did have biases, and one of them was when we looked at the upper scientific managerial levels, the internal scientific committee, the research program coordinators, the vice directors, or the scientific advisory board. The one place where we didn't have bias was actually in the researchers guarantors of the celebró program, because in our case it was 50-50 from the start. Nevertheless, so because of that, we look at the past 5 years in a series of issues related to representation of women in leadership positions, making sure that the glass ceiling does not exist at CRAG, favorable conditions for women scientists to develop their scientific career, recruitment processes, and the visibility of women in research. And as a result of that, nowadays, we have a fairly well balanced, pretty much all the managerial committees and so on are 50-50, and the group leaders are now 42%. So with respect to recruitment and career development plan, we did implement positive recruitment, that meaning simply that we wouldn't go through a recruitment process if we didn't have any woman in the shortlist. Then we will have to restart the process again, and we had to do that once over the past 4 years. We always had gender balance selection panels. We have had in all of our selection of our celebró programs, junior group leaders, postdocs, and PhD students. And we try to avoid unconscious gender-related biases. For example, our junior group leader selection panels, they're requested to study a video specifically focused on these recruitment biases. As a result of that, we basically ran 4 selection processes with 2 junior group leaders in computational biology, 2 in plant biology, and again 50-50. Not because we were actually looking for that ratio, but that ratio was the consequence of the way we implemented our recruitment. Now, we also had the flexibility in these recruitment processes. The timeline, we changed the timeline to accommodate maternity cases in one instance, and flexibility in the incorporation date for researchers that we had selected after their maternity. Talent attraction policies that, for example, the possibility to travel for a job interview with a child if they're less than 1 year, and then if we recruit them, aid for childcare, and aid if the partner cannot initially relocate with the researchers, because that also happens. The researcher may be ready to come, but the partner not yet. And then also remote work for researchers with dependents outside, with initially dependents or with dependents outside of Barcelona, and stop the clock policies. With visibility, we attempt to support and enhance the visibility of our women researchers, gender balance 50-50 in invited and selected speakers in all the conferences and workshops that we organize. For instance, last year we celebrated our 15th anniversary, and which included talks by researchers associated with CRAG at different stages of their career, and 100% of the speakers were women, including the external keynote speaker that we invited to. And also we have specific communication actions to promote the science carried out by women researchers at CRAG. Now, this is the results of our latest internal survey that we did a few months ago, addressing the level of satisfaction with current gender equality aspects for research personnel at CRAG. And overall, the global average was 4.20/5, and roughly 80% of the research personnel were either satisfied or very satisfied. That doesn't mean, of course, that there's no room for improvement. So we now have our Women in Science Committee that is working on the 2020-2014 action plan, addressing mostly 5 thematic areas: recruitment, more on that, career development, work-life balance, and communication and visibility. And one last point that I was gonna make very quickly. You probably have noticed that this session is not gender balanced because most of the speakers are women. And in fact, this just shows, I was following up the doodle that we used to sign up for this conference. And so you have there the women and men. So there's a gap there, and until this gap exists, we will have a problem. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, José Luis. Now is the turn for Bruna Vives, Managing Director of the Center, CRG, the Center of Genomic Regulation.
So it's a pleasure to be here in the first gender equality event of the SOMMa, and to be presenting you some best practices of the CRG. It was very difficult to pick up just 2 best practices because also we've been doing a lot within the Libra. So first, on the motivation, I think we all have the same motivation. It's the gender imbalance in academia, and at the CRG we had the same problem, and this data is just the gender sizers from data from the European Commission. So the main drivers of the CRG were initially the HR Excellence Award that was awarded in 2013, and gender balance was one of the 3 priorities that we identified in our action plan. Then we created a Gender Balance Committee with a wide representation from several, with all the scientific communities at the CRG, and chaired by Isabel Bernos, who is the real expert in gender aspects. Then really Libra, and Cheryl mentioned the European project that the CRG coordinated between 2015 and 2019 was instrumental really for creating structural changes, and I think the project really helped us in working with peers and creating these structural changes that we needed in terms of gender. So these are the 4 areas that Libra was focusing on, and I think Cheryl mentioned this, so I will not go into detail. So the main question for the CRG at that stage was really how to improve and sustain gender balance at group leader level, so because we didn't have a good representation of women. So the first best example I picked up was Recruit Without Bias. And here for the shortlisted candidates, we have the recommendation to shortlist at least 1/3 of competitive candidates. And of course, for group leaders, what it means is 1/3 of female candidates. And we like to call it a recommendation, even though we really enforce it. So if we don't have this 1/3, then we stop, as also Cheryl mentioned this. In the panel also, we want to have an adequate gender balance, also again, the 1/3 rule. And we created this video, Serco coordinated this. This is the Catalan Alliance for Research Institutes to avoid gender bias. And all the panel members have to watch this video before moving on to the panel selections. Then Libra, also Cheryl mentioned a lot of actions in the area of recruiting, so I will not repeat them, but the recruitment booklet that was created was very useful in really changing a lot of things in the way we do recruitment. Also the workshops on implicit bias, we run these workshops in our faculty retreat with all our scientific PIs. So the outcome of this, and we're very proud of it, is that we have achieved a 40% of female junior group leaders in 2019, and in 2012 we had 0, so which is really a big success. And this data that is on the screen, this is from a gender summit that took place last week in Girona. This was for biomedical institutes in Catalonia, and the data is from these institutes. So we see to the left the gender sizers for the period 2015 to 2017. And at the CRG in 2017, we managed that these scissors are closing, so are coming closer to the equality stripe, so which is really nice, and we are very, very proud of this. So the second success story I picked up is related to career development and also work-life balance. So this is the WASP program, the Women Scientist Support Program that was created in 2016 by the CRG, and this was inspired by a German program that is actually in place at the foundation. So basically, in the period from 2016 to 2019, 12 female postdocs benefited from this program. So the program is really aimed at those, basically, it's postdocs that have an ambition and the potential to become independent scientists. So basically, this is what the program is intending, and it gives a small amount of a grant so that you can cover, for example, babysitting, and you can focus on your research. So one of the testimonials of the beneficiaries of this program said that the WASP grant allowed me to be able to afford extra hours of childcare each week after school for my children. This time was essential for me to successfully publish my manuscript, not only for the benefit of my career, but also emotionally reducing the stress of balancing work and family life. And the success of the program is also that 2 of these beneficiaries are now independent PIs at 2 SOMMa institutes, at CNIO and at IBEC, and 2 of them are in the process of transitioning to an independent position. So we think this was a successful initiative. To finish up lessons learned from all these years in doing many actions in gender equality is that really, and Cheryl mentioned many of these, you really need to obtain and maintain commitment from the top. And Luis, the director of the CRG, is very committed, and one of the reflections that he wrote for the last International Women's Day, you can see it on the screen. Also, you need the bottom-up approach, and the Gender Balance Committee is very diverse and is very committed, and this is essential. Second, you need to put adequate resources, staff and budget. We had Libra with additional resources, but it meant still we had to put budget aside, and this was my job to make sure we had these resources. Then you have to commit to action plans. You need to look at data from the perspective of gender, look for advice in gender experts. And in Libra, we had very good gender experts. We wouldn't have been able to do this without these gender experts. And also collaborate with peers. And of course, Libra was essential, was instrumental for this. And also CRG is involved in other projects in terms of gender. So here you have the Libra team. You don't see it, but also the gender balance is always difficult to get men getting involved. So basically, what are our future goals? So just as a curiosity, yesterday I learned that there are 122 different types of genders, so which I found really surprising. So our future goal, originally, so we had the goal of improve the gender balance for the group leaders at the CRG, and we now want to move from gender equality to a broader perspective and cover equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I think it's in the sense that also Cheryl mentioned in the talk. So thank you, and thank you on behalf of the CRG Gender Balance Committee. They are really the team behind all these successes and initiatives at the CRG. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruna. Now, Teresa Sanchez, the head of Strategic Initiative from the Institute from Bioengineer of Catalonia, will talk. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Before talking about our Equal Opportunities and Diversity Management Plan, I would like to briefly introduce IBEC so that you understand our motivations behind this plan. At IBEC, we combine biology, physical science, and engineering to develop solutions for health. This means that we need to have a very multidisciplinary and diverse team, and we really think that diversity is one strength of our organization. For this reason, over the past years, we have tried to develop a culture of excellence in recruiting and training. Our Equal Opportunities and Diversity Plan is just a piece of this culture, and which has led us to achieve some awards that I list here, but not to show off, but to make a reflection that I think that the mere existence of these awards, like the Athenas Swan as well, can be a driver for organizations to motivate people, and especially the directions to go for it. And also for us, I would like to say that it has been very important, the setup of international recruiting programs for PhD postdocs and junior group leaders, because this has led us to think about our selection processes and also to move forward and establish new protocols to promote gender balance. And in spite of some achievements, as you can see from the graph, and like in many centers, although we are in general gender balance, we still have to make a lot of work in senior positions from postdoc to group leaders. And in our current Equal Opportunities and Diversity Management Plan has been done by our Diversity and Gender Committee, which is composed by members from all career stages and also from research and support staff. And we have used the GEAR Action Toolbox methodology from the European Institute of Gender Equality, and it covers many lines of action that I'm happy that Cheryl has mentioned, and I will mention some of them. Well, in leadership and decision making has been one of our main points that we wanted to improve, but also that has given us, we have encountered many difficulties because, as it was already mentioned, women in senior positions I think are overloaded with so many committees, and although we have invited women scientists to be part of our committee, well, in 2019 we have added 2 more women, but for us it's been difficult to increase the number of women. And also it happens with our internal committees for selection, where our female group leaders have to go again and again. But this has also been an opportunity for senior women, not group leaders, because we have decided to invite them to these internal committees, which can also be an opportunity for career development. Also, our director is a male, and we are not changing that for the moment. But in 2019, we have strengthened our direction model, appointing 3 deputy directors, and 2 of them are female. Also, we think it is important to work on leadership and management skills, and these have been intensively included in our training catalog. And here I mention other actions. I would like to highlight maybe that we have started to work in the incorporation of gender perspective in research, which is very important, and especially in our case that we are working for health. Also, we are worried about the promotion of young women in STEM, so we have an outreach program with emphasis on the participation of women. And also regarding diversity, I am quite proud of the SOMMa program, where we're trying to make IBEC a more inclusive place for people with disabilities. And although there is a lot of work to do, I would like to stress some success. One of it has been the increase in the percentage of postdocs and and group leaders since 2016. We think that one of the reasons has been that for junior group leader position, we have established that at least 40% of women have to go to the second stage, to the interview stage. And this has led us that since 2012, we have incorporated many female junior group leaders through our tenure track program, and also this has led us to increase the number of ERC grantees in our institution, which proves that the commitment towards diversity and gender balance leads to excellence in research, which is what we want to achieve in the end. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Now is the turn for Josefa Masegosa, that is a researcher and chair of the Gender Equality Office at the Institute of Astrophysics in Andalusia.
Hello. I'd like to thank the organizer of this meeting, because I think it's very important for all the center in general, and in particular for the center that promote excellent research. So, my apologies, because the director of the Severo Ochoa is not here because of some family problem. And so that this is how is the situation in our institute. The evolution that during the last, this comes from the last report from 2018, and we produced during what happened to this during the last 5 years. And as you can see, the staff position is almost not moving. And I'm afraid, because I am going to give a message that the CSIC doesn't like, is that in my area, that is physics and technology in physics, we are in the same situation, 20% in the last 20 years. The first report I have produced was in 1994, and still we are in the same situation. So that is, this is a message, especially for if there are around some people with political influence to modify this. The size or graph that normally is. We have only one professor de investigación, full professor in our institute, female. And as you see, this bump in the IC, that is investigador científico, and this comes from our point of view, that this comes from the age. If you plot the average age in each level, you see that since the economic crisis came, no women were promoted to higher level. So that this rearranged the situation, and this is not going to change, because as you see in the youngest people, is only men are being recruited. And it's dramatic when you look in the last 5 years for postdoc, because in postdoc the number of postdoc is going down, and in the case of women, we know that this is much worse than in the case of men. What is the thing that we do to improve the gender balance in our institute? Well, I am very proud because we have produced the first gender equality plan that was approved by the institute in 2018 in March. And we produce a gender statistic, celebrate the Girl and Women Day with different activities, with scholars and public conference in high school in order to increase the number of women interested in STEM. And the Women's Day, normally from the 90s, we are organizing every year a round table with different aspects of this. And we are also very proud of the books fair in Granada because we organize conference and take care that 50% of the of the people in the conference are female astronomers, and we got this last year and the year before. And I think that in a very interesting, we publish an interesting work in the same vein that Cheryl tells us in Nature Astronomy because it improves not only the numbers but it presents the sociological study of gender in astronomy in Spain. We can get some good things from it. And also have, of course, in order to be present in many things. So we made many publications in outreach magazine and journals, and we are very, very proud of one of our senior postdoc because she got the first Nature Award on Inspiring Science. And so this is Miriana Pobi. She's now in Ethiopia, in Africa, and with the money she got from this prize, she's producing a network of African women working in science, taking the model of Amit that most of us belong to. And of course, with the Severo Ochoa, I was happy, and I like to congratulate Ana Puig particularly because in the Severo Ochoa was you have to present an equality plan, and we did also. And the thing we are doing now is just to take care of this main activity, colloquia. Here we use Vera Rubin colloquia, Hypatia, incoming visitor, and Jocelyn Bell. And these are the numbers that we have so far. And from the postdoc recruiting, where we have 2 fellows that are women. And that's it. Well, I am also the chair of the Gender Commission of the Institute. He also a member of the scientific board of the Severo Ochoa to take care that everything is well settled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josefa. Now it's the turn for Neus Domingo from the Catalonian Institute for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology. She's the chair of the Gender Equality Office.
I'm sorry, we are not an office. I would like that we had an office or we had somebody that was fully devoted to equality. In my institute, unfortunately, I'm just a researcher, permanent researcher, that I'm taking the most of these, try to push all these duties forward. So following your comment, that's nice to have professionalization in places. I would like to endorse most of the presentations that have given during all the morning, from this very nice talk overviewing most of the aspects of gender inequality to these small pieces of pictures of different equal opportunities plans and activities and actions that are being developed in most of the institutes, of SOMMa institutes. In my case, I belong to ICN2. ICN2, it's a middle-sized institute. We are about 300 people there, 18 research groups. From these, only 3 of them are led by women scientists. So we have only 3 women that are IPs of the institute. And we got a couple of Celebró awards. The latest one was in 2018, and they run more or less simultaneously to the Equal Opportunities Plan. I'm not going to list all the actions that we have been trying to develop, because I've been following very carefully most of the examples of very nice equal opportunity plans, such as the one of CRG before, and trying to learn from them and trying to implement most of their philosophy in our EO plan. So we have been following actions leading with perspective, visibility of women in science, and leading with balancing of life and work. But today here I will try to focus not on what we did, but on how we got there, and try to point and give you another perspective of achieving or working for equality. So back in 2014, when we started to develop and discussing about how to develop our first EO plan, of course, we faced most of the big questions. So where is our bias? How can we solve it? And of course, we realized that this is, there are a lot of influences there. We have followed the talk from Cheryl this morning. Some of them we can act on. Some others, they are away from our scope. But what we decided to do is to act locally, but look globally. And in this sense, we needed to know from all the things that are done abroad and all the possible factors that are influencing on our in-house on balance, which were the main factors and which were more relevant, and how could we tackle them more specifically. So we were looking for a specific medicine plan for our case. As an ICN2 institute, we are, most of our research areas are in the hardcore of STEAMs. So we are facing mostly physicists, chemists in our staff, scientific staff distribution. So we were also aware of how could we expect the equality to look like in this particular STEAM environment. So what we suddenly realized is that in order to prepare the specific medicine for our institute, we needed something, and we needed data. So we needed to get the information, the right information, with the right correlation about not only quantitative, it was not only a matter of counting, so we can all count and see how many women are there, but in order to understand why there are so few women there, we need to go a bit further, and we were also worried about another aspect, that is, even we are a small number of women, because maybe due to this STEAM environment, we could not expect we to be the majority of the institute, we still worried about how these women were performing. Are we having equity also in the institute? Are we having really equal opportunities there? And in order to achieve this, we needed more data than just counting. So we started this hard work of getting the data sets, and unfortunately we didn't have problems, so we had to run with Excel, so Cyril was mentioning. But we were trying to correlate data related with 3 main areas. One was scientific productivity. This is the typical data that you can get from Scopus related with publications, order of authorship in publications, year of publications, impact factor of the publication, so on and so forth, and related with every single researcher in our institute at different stages of their career, from students up to PIs, and also related through administration processes on which was the way to access our institute, or what was the grant that was funding whatever position. So 2 examples of what this process led us to, and I think there are success examples, one was that we realized that we had quite an imbalance on the PhD stage of students incoming in the institute. But then we realized by analyzing this data that this imbalance was mainly created by the internationalization of our institute. So we had a pool of possible candidates that is international one, and this pool is intrinsically unbalanced. So that imbalance was transferred to our selection processes and was transferred to our hiring and our pool of final PhD students. And still we realized, and we were able to do this because to do this analysis because we had a web platform that was recording all the information for every single candidate and for every single position offered. So a way to overcome this was to prepare a PhD program that could try to attract talent, international talent, while keeping aware of this imbalance due to this internationality and try to cancel them and to tackle them specifically. And another I would say, case of success is the correlation between all scientific productivity data and the specific productivity of each single person of the institute. That has led us to realize, so we developed part of this project in correlation with some group of gentics, so people, sociologists that are studying the gender impact in research from UOC, University Oberta de Catalunya. And we were trying to see how this, whether it was a good influence for the final excellence of research if the teams were balanced or not. And from this, what we got is a series of new inputs that we could push forward by developing new actions in the second Equal Opportunities Plan. I would like to say that, unfortunately, most of this is already biased, right? Because and here I would like just to leave this question open to the audience. When we are tackling to these indicators of excellence or publications or scientific production, we may question ourselves or answer or ask ourselves whether these are already good examples for excellence in research or not, even they are the ones we are using and we are using abroad to get money and to apply for grants. So just leave this open question. Thank you.
Thanks, Neus. Now is the turn for Aurelio Ruiz, that works at the Department of Information and Communication Technologies at the University of Pompeu Fabra, and he manages the María de Maeztu unit.
So in my case, I will not explain all the actions, but I think the main issues that has been already talked on. On the one hand, UPF, my university, had a significant change kind of 5 years ago with equality when the Equality Office, they changed the person responsible for the Equality Office, and then on the one hand, she's a real expert on the topic, and then she started working with the whole community, and the renewal of the equality plan was a truly participatory process, no? And participatory at all levels, no? Both the sense of meeting with all the collectives, no? From students and research, etc., and also opening online platforms that could allow anonymized also feedback. And I think the plan we have as a university is now very rich and very powerful because it has this richness and endorsement from the community. And then our role as a department at the university was to try to influence this program because we are the only engineering department in a non-polytechnical university. UPF is mostly known for social sciences and life sciences. And then we have specific problems, no, that have to do with the female participation in research or gender issues when designing technological tools. No? The second area then was in our functioning. Somebody asked before, no, if it was mandatory. We included mandatory training on the PhD program and a mandatory in the first year proposal. No, they have to defend the proposal to advance in the PhD program. We made it also compulsory, no analysis of gender issues in their topic of research. And as Neus now mentions, no, we have an issue of attracting more women, but also to guarantee that the ones we already have, it's around 3% of our staff, have the right conditions to succeed, both things. No? And the third one, the typical problem we face, the departments at engineering, is that we need more women at the entry level, no? More diversity. And here we run a lot of large program that I will not get into detail, but for me the key aspects when we designed that were on the one hand, not based activities based on scientific evidence, and many of that evidence we generated that. No, we conducted the studies, no, on the gender presence on Wikipedia, for instance, to launch the actions on Wikipedia, or the fact that girls are offered less technological no, toys and boys in school, and then targeted specific problems, and tackle the whole pipeline, no, from the primary high school students, the programs, our current students in engineering. We made a specific mentoring program for them because it's also known, no, that they have less mentoring opportunities while they're doing studies. A general work on increasing visibility of women for men and women, as many of you already discussed, and the support also to female associations, no, and generating an old girls club, no, or how would you call that, you know? Also these spaces of networking, and I think an important point is not to invent new activities, but to help and empower all those many associations that you have around, no? Because as a university you can offer many things, no? In terms of community, space, visibility, etc. And we kind of tend to invent many things, no? And in terms of visibility, for instance, it was impressive, not to see the how do you call that, honorary doctorates at the university. In a non-polytechnical university, there was 1 out of 13 at that moment, no? And the only one had been Michelle Bachelet years ago, no? So, I think, okay, our first doctorate will be to a woman, and it was to Dorcas Anthony, in fact. And also, to me, the powerful thing is not that we have a gender program, that we are successfully managing to embed gender perspective in all the programs we have, no? So that the program for primary school is, we are enlarging the overall program and designing this program with gender perspective rather than having a program for girls in technology and so on. And also, I forgot before, also some mandatory issues, like when you're organizing an event or something, part of the request of spaces or whatever includes which is the gender balance of your activity. And often there is a lack of gender balance, an unconscious one, so to say, no? So to make it visible in all the activities, and I agree with the actions like making the toilets visible, making it visible everywhere, and also, no, when you're organizing anything, do the tick. Did you consider? No, go back. No, and I think that truly works. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurelio. Now will talk Maria Santos, Associate Professor at the Research Group ComSense Lab from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you. Thank you to all the organizers, and thank you for the nice talk, Cheryl. I come from a very small group. We are 30 teachers. It's a Maria de Maeztu group within a big department at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. And we work in engineering, telecommunication engineering. And well, I have to confess, I'm a little bit intimidated by all the fabulous equal opportunities programs that you all have. What I'm presenting here is very humble. We don't have equal opportunities office. We don't have any person which is devoted to this topic at our group. And I think the director of our Maria de Maeztu was being creative, as taken from Cheryl, when he asked me to come here to give a little bit of visibility, because you could say I am the expert in our institution about that. But this is not by choice, it's just by chance, because I've been asked to do things, by the school, by all the initiatives that take equal opportunities into account. They count on me because, we like your style, you're a good teacher, so we like you to be like a role model. And so I've been, participating in those initiatives, and I'm going to show you what I've been doing. Being a teaching institution, that's what we do. We teach, we inspire, we try to promote, and we try to go to schools. And I will just tell you what I've been doing, and yeah, hopefully from this we can, we can make the evolution to have like an office or something like that. And being here and learning from you, that's also, motivating. Maybe I can go back and tell, the people that make the decisions that we should get an office for that, and we should, start initiatives. Okay, I don't know. Okay, that's what we are trying. Girls, they do have dreams. I remember my niece when she was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be important. And I think that's what all girls, many of our girls want, to be relevant, to be important. But they don't know how. They don't have role models. They don't see themselves. What exactly can I do? I want to be important, but I really don't know how, And these are numbers. I want to skip this very quickly. It's 20% when the IT studies the demand. But what I see, I have second year or master students. It's only 10%, really. I sit in my exams and I count. I'm bored there, so I just count how many girls do I have in the exam, and it's always 10%. In our group, I told you we were 30 teachers. It's only 3 girls there. So it's me and my 2 colleagues. Hopefully you will see them. Oh. Well, this is one of the programs which I'm most proud of. It's like it's one engineer at each school. So I don't like events which are only for women, It's important to engage everyone. So we had programs where we only invite the high school girls, but this is for everyone. So you go there and you just show you're an engineer. So there is one engineer coming to our school today, and it happens to be a female. It really doesn't matter much, but it's a female giving the speak. And this is me in one, and these are my 2 colleagues, Nuria and Mercè. We are the 3 women in our group. And and I think this is one of the things I'm most proud of. This is me in the, with the small ones. I want you to see this one, this one raising her hand. Yeah, she's lovely. And you can see in the other one, oh, I'm sorry. You see her there, talking, that she's really empowered. Yeah, she's really, she has, I think, the strength that she needs to be important, She was giving us the definition of engineer, and she was really lovely. These are us making the human wave, because I was talking to them about electromagnetic waves. And this is me also doing waves with them. That was nice. This is one event only for girls, which also was nice, but I think we should, go for things where we have more boys also. Okay, this is also something which I found interesting. It's a mentoring program. They called me for that also to, motivate. But this is something, they had lots of activities. They lasted until, 11 in the night, so I couldn't, follow up. I did it just 1 year. I think I helped the student which I was following, and she was explaining to me how she was mostly interested in how did you do it, how when you found these problems, how did you tackle them, how was your, and this is this year at the Mobile conference in Barcelona. Well, this is also a nice initiative. These are young IT girls. They have a website, and they are also lovely. They're like students of engineering that they just got together in this initiative, and they asked also me to give a talk. That's the talk. Well, the room wasn't what I was expecting, but I did what I could. Everything is like a little bit on the way. And this is me, showing them with a laser some, critical angle and some properties of the electromagnetic waves. So that was all. I hope we can show you more in the next meeting, something that is more serious and more, more like a plan. But this is what I wanted to show today.
Thank you, Maria.
Now we'll talk Roberta Sambrini, a researcher at the Institute for Cross-Disciplinary Physics and Complex Systems. She's also the responsible of the Gender Equality Office.
Hi. So today I will not make a list of things we are doing. Anyway, I would feel I will share the same feelings of the previous speaker. I mean, we are doing things, but this is we have seen example of really massive things. There was a pointer here. So what I'm going to speak about is more related to some activity we did with this 11F platform. And you know there is this day, International Day of Women and Girls in Science, 11th of February, and this was decided by the United Nations in 2015, and there are many activities taking place during these days, and in particular, 2 years ago, we started from different institutions in the Balearic Islands also to take part of this in these initiatives. And we are so the people in the platform are really coming from very different backgrounds. So we are physicists, biologists, engineering, it's very broad, and also in very different stage of their career. So there are students, postdoc, and there are people that do not have any work contract, so also in very precarious work conditions. And then there are also permanent, so it's a very broad group. And the aim of this group of people was just to join, to try to organize activity for making visible the role of women in science and technology and proposing initiative to break the gender gap. So this seems that we were doing different initiatives. I'm not listing them. So most of them are outreach activities. So like citas rapidas, in which every researcher is speaking during a very short time about the research is performing, and then the visitors, the activity are just moving to another table and listening to someone else. And there are seminars, round tables, so there have been very different kind of activities. But the one thing I wanted to speak about today was more related to this engagement with the policymaker that was mentioned before. So when we were doing this activity during 2018, we were really active as a group of people, and then the Director General de Innovación and Recerca invited us actually to prepare a document of suggestions that we could do. And this has been a really inspiring period after that request. What we have been doing was to meet periodically to prepare this document. It has been pretty tough to make time to do this, but it was also really interesting and inspiring because we are all different backgrounds and we have really different problems in each community. We have seen also today, I mean, we will see later the typical example, but in science, in biology, we really have different engagement problems in the students and also problems after during the career. So what we did was to prepare this document, and 1 year later we were presenting the manifesto associated to this roadmap, and then we were delivering this roadmap, and now we will see if there are any consequences happening after it. What we have identified are 3 blocks. We have identified 3 main things we need to really tackle to reduce the gender gap. One is related really to management and funding, to the process of evaluation in competitive calls, and to the inclusion of gender perspective in scientific studies. Some of these things have been mentioned before. More specifically related to some career, encourage the participation of women in study and research of scientific discipline with low female representation. Then we have been also involved in considering which are the policies can be actually developed to avoid discrimination and harassment due to gender in work. And this, for instance, there was a part of the platform that was a lot more worried about this kind of things than the other, because the problems are really different going across the disciplines. And then, of course, there is an important part of training and education. The only thing I wanted to show is just to leave a final message. We have seen this scissor. We are very familiar with this kind of seesaw diagrams in which we see at the beginning there is almost a fair equilibrated representation of male and female in study and in the early stage of research, and then a gap is opening, and this is relating to this ceiling glass, here represented by Alicia Framis. But what is worrying also for me, and it appears also in one of the diagrams shown before by Josefa, was this fact. These are the typical diagrams across different disciplines, but these are the ones that are the diagrams related to engineering, physics, and these kind of faculties. So I think that for me, at least, it's very important to encourage the participation of women in the study of this kind of disciplines, also because there is a bias that is happening before. And I have a son and I experience this thing when it's really something that is happening a lot before that they arrive to the university. So when they are there, it's already too late. And you have already these faculties with very small representativity. And for me, the important thing about this platform has been the message about the importance of joining the effort, because we really need to join the effort across different disciplines, also because we have a lot to learn, but also to take care about the fact that there are area-specific issues, and also we have to take care of that because this is also important for me. Okay?
Thank you very much, Roberta. We are going to skip the question section because we are behind schedule. We will have time during lunch to talk with each other. So now we are going to finish the event with the closing remarks from Anna Pui. She's the director of the Women and Science Unit from the Ministry of Science. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you to the organizers and to all the participants for this amazing event. I have learned so much from you. You are models of reference for the Spanish science, technology and innovation system, and we have very high expectations on you. You know that both our funding system, our state funding system, is supporting all these gender policy advancements and standards, especially in the funding scheme for, how do we call it, for strengthening the RPOs, the research performing organizations, the Centers and Units of Excellence. You know, we keep asking, and somebody mentioned it today, to introduce gender equality measures in your strategic program. But now, in our recent legal basis, you might be already aware, for research and innovation projects, and especially for this strengthening RPO's funding scheme. Now you are also being required or incentivized for integrating gender into the content of the research, and how do you do this in your institutions. And also recently there were also some new advancements for introduce some kind of flexibility regarding family and leaves, and how to avoid these leaves to penalize the evaluation of the researcher's productivity. Okay. Also, you might be aware, even if you are not a center of excellence, of a unit of excellence, our new legal basis for funding human resources in research, development and innovation, those for predoctoral and postdoctoral grants. Now we have a new evaluation criteria for gender equality in the applicant institutions. In this criteria now, we can take into account if there is gender balance in the board of directors, if there is an ongoing gender equality plan, if the institution is doing efforts to really improve the integration of gender into research content. And we are also expecting to take into account here, it's already mentioned, the Gender Equality Award we are planning to put in place at national level for research institutions. It is upcoming. It should have been already in place, but there's changing policy issues made the strategic plan for gender equality, which was one of the measures, to be a bit delayed, but will be upcoming soon. And we are collaborating with the Spanish Institute for Gender Equality to run this national award. And doing this, we are also putting in place one of the measures of our roadmap for developing the era in Spain, 2016-2020, in which we committed to create new evaluation criteria to incentivize gender equality and gender mainstreaming in proposals, research teams, and research institutions, and in the content of the research and innovation itself. And doing this, we are also aligned with all the current European framework for gender and science. You may already be aware that the Parliament, the Council, and the European Economic and Social Committee, all of these big European institutions, made provisions in 2015 trying to push us, the member states, but also the research performing institutions, to make significant progress in gender equality. And for the research funding agencies and the member states, we should try to link funding to improvements and to some gender standards regarding gender equality. So we're really trying to do this. And so I'm very happy to be here and see that you are making good progress. And I think for this kind of awards, as Cheryl was explaining, not everybody has to be since the beginning in the same level, but what it is important that everybody show that they are making progress, okay, and making impact with the message. Last week we were in Helsinki. The current Finnish presidency organized a conference, a 2-day conference, after 20 years of gender and science policies in Europe. And the idea was not only to see the advancements, but also to push for a call for action, which will be available soon. We made some changes in the last day in a participatory way, so it is not the final version already released, but I will be happy to share it with you. And next year, in 2020, September, Spain is organizing the 11th European Conference for Gender Equality in Higher Education. It is called Higher Education because it's the series of conferences, but it has to do also with research and innovation. The Spanish subtitle is going to be Advancing Gender Equality in Academia, Research and Innovation. So we will be happy to count on you to participate there and to share your experiences and to learn from each other. And just to end with these closing words, insisting that I recognize and appreciate the advances you are making, and I also would like to push you to try to do better, to scale up and to upgrade your policies. I think, as it has been said, this is a win-win approach for your institutions, for the society, for the Spanish science, technology, and innovation system. It is not only that you make better figures in gender equality, you make your research and your innovation really more excellent, more creative, and the results of these research and innovation processes can be better applied to the whole society, which is, as you have said, a diverse society. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna, and also to all speakers, especially to Cheryl. I think we have all learned a lot today, and I hope that this meeting will serve to generate joint forces at the SOMMa Alliance. Now, for those of you that can, we would like to take a picture of all the participants at this meeting at the entrance. So to arrange the picture, I ask directors and speakers to be in the first rows. And after the picture, we have lunch at the cafeteria. We will, those of you that don't know CNIO will tell you where, well, it's just in front of the auditorium. Thank you.